Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I had been putting off this surgery for years. The doctors kept telling me it was necessary, that waiting would only make things worse. So I finally scheduled it, made all the arrangements, and prepared to be away from home for a month. The surgery itself was brutal, and the recovery even more so. 6 weeks later, I still can barely walk without pain shooting through my body. The week before I was supposed to leave, my pet sitter canceled. Just like that, a text message saying she couldn't do it anymore. I panicked. I had 3 kittens and a fish tank that needed daily care. I couldn't just abandon them. That's when my friend reached out. She was going through a rough patch, having trouble finding a place to stay. I thought I could help her while solving my own problem. I offered her the money I was going to pay my original sitter. She could stay at my house, take care of my pets, and have a comfortable place to sleep for a month. The agreement was simple. Feed my kittens and fish daily. Keep the house reasonably clean. My car would be there in case of emergency, but she should avoid driving it otherwise since it was a lease with limited miles. I even went to the grocery store and spent $300 stocking up on food for her. She seemed so grateful. She promised she'd take excellent care of everything. After I was admitted to the hospital, things apparently changed. I found out later that she moved her boyfriend in. She also brought her own cat. The surgery knocked me out completely. The recovery was even worse than expected. Every movement hurt. Every breath felt like work. When I finally got discharged and made it back home, I could barely make it from the car to my front door. I unlocked the door, and the smell hit me first. Something musty and wrong. I stepped inside and I was shocked. Dishes were piled in the sink, crusted with old food. More dishes sat on every available surface around the house. Half-eaten meals were abandoned on end tables. I found dried cat vomit on the floor in multiple rooms, left there so long it had hardened into the carpet. Bags of used cat litter sat in the hallway. Trash bags, half full, were lined up in the entryway. The couch had mysterious stains all over it. The floors were filthy with tracked-in dirt and debris. Then I saw the fireplace. A 3-foot circle of wood ash covered the floor around it. I checked my wood pile outside and they had burned through 80% of my winter supply. I wouldn't have enough to last the rest of the season now. I stood there, barely able to support my own weight, staring at the disaster my home had become. The pain from surgery was already constant, but now I had to deal with this. I started with the dishes. 4 full loads in the dishwasher. Between each load, I had to sit down and rest. My body screamed at me to stop, but I couldn't live like this. I swept, I mopped, I vacuumed. I took out bag after bag of trash. Every night since coming home, I've pushed myself too far, trying to clean up her mess. Every night I've ended up in massive pain, barely able to sleep. She wanted to stay longer. She approached me about it the day after I got home. She said she was thinking she could stay a few more weeks. She claimed she wanted to help with the kids and take care of me while I recovered. I was so weak, so exhausted, that I couldn't even properly argue. I tried to be diplomatic about it. I couldn't afford to create conflict when I could barely stand. Somehow, she negotiated staying 2 extra days. Her boyfriend sat on my couch those 2 days. He ate my food. He watched me struggle to clean, moving around him like furniture. He never once offered to help. She did cook 1 meal for me, which I suppose was something. I called my 2 best friends, a married couple I trust completely. I asked them to come by when she was supposed to leave. I wanted witnesses to make sure these people actually left my house. I told her and her boyfriend hours in advance that their ride was coming at a specific time. They needed to be packed and ready. They did nothing. They waited until 10 minutes before the ride arrived to start throwing things into bags. The driver had to wait 30 minutes while they finished. When they were finally leaving, the boyfriend turned to my friend. He asked how long they were staying. My friend didn't answer, just gave him a blank stare. The boyfriend went on about how he was just concerned about me and wanted to make sure I had the help I needed. He said he'd be back to help out as much as he could. This man, who had done absolutely nothing to help, was promising to come back. The thought made me feel sick. When they left, my real friends sent me straight to bed. They cleaned my kitchen and living room while my kids helped where they could. Even with their help, I spent the next several days finding more messes they had left behind. My son eventually vacuumed the couch cushions and cleaned up the fireplace area. I still haven't tackled those stains. Then I went to check my car. I had given her permission for 2 specific trips into the city, about 30 miles away. She had admitted to using it a little bit beyond that. I was too weak to make a fuss at the time. I checked the mileage today. Over 1,100 miles. These people drove my leased car with its strict mileage limits over 1,100 unauthorized miles. They used me when I was at my absolute weakest, unable to defend myself or my property. I sent a text this morning requesting 30 cents per mile for unauthorized use, $255. Either I get some money back for my troubles, or I scare them away so badly that I never have to see them again. Either way, I win. I've been the type who takes school seriously. Not in an obnoxious way, but I care about my grades and putting in effort. So when our teacher announced we'd be doing a group project worth 20% of our final grade, I wasn't exactly thrilled about relying on other people. The teacher assigned us into groups of 3. I got paired with 2 classmates from my class. One girl, who I'll call Karen, since she turned out to be exactly that type of person, and a guy I'd barely spoken to before. We had 1 full week to create a presentation on climate change and its effects on coastal cities. The first day after we got assigned, I suggested we meet up after school to divide the work. Karen told me she was busy all week with dance practice. The guy said he could maybe help on the weekend. I waited until the weekend. He showed up for about an hour, helped me brainstorm a few ideas, then said he had to leave for a family thing. So I was on my own. I spent the entire weekend doing research. I read through dozens of articles, watched documentaries, took notes on everything. Then I started writing the script for our presentation. I wrote out exactly what each person would say, making sure it flowed naturally and covered all the important points. After that, I created the slideshow. I found relevant statistics, made graphs, formatted everything to look professional. Then Karen texted me asking how the project was going. I told her I'd finished most of it, but we still needed some visual elements. She said she'd handle it. The next day at school, she handed me a few printed pictures she'd found online. That was it. That was her entire contribution. Some photos she'd probably spent 5 minutes Googling and printing at the library. She acted like she'd done me this huge favor too. She told me she'd stayed up late finding the perfect images for our presentation. I didn't say anything. I just took the pictures and added them to the slides. The guy helped me rehearse our parts once the day before we had to present, which I appreciated, but it still didn't change the fact that I'd done almost everything. Presentation day came around. We went up in front of the class. I was nervous because I always get anxious speaking in public, but I made sure I knew my material inside and out. I explained the research, went through the statistics, discussed the implications. Karen stood there smiling the whole time, delivering her small section with this super bubbly, confident voice like she was a news anchor. The guy read his part clearly and helped point to things on the slides. When we finished, our teacher said we did a good job. She called our work excellent and said it was very informative and well put together. I felt relieved. All that stress and work had paid off. Then a few days later, she handed back our graded rubrics. I looked at mine and my stomach dropped. 7 out of 10. The guy got a 9, Karen got a perfect 10. I sat there staring at the paper, completely confused. How did Karen, who'd contributed some printed pictures, get a better grade than me? After class, I went up to the teacher's desk. I asked her if I could talk about my grade on the group project. She asked me what about it. I told her I got a 7 but didn't understand why, since I'd done almost all of the research and writing and made all the slides. She explained that the grade was based on presentation skills, not just effort. She said Karen was much more confident when speaking and the other student helped with the visual components. I pointed out that I provided the visual components and he just pointed at them. I told her Karen only gave me a few pictures and that I'd done 90% of the actual work. She said the rubric was clear and she was grading based on how we presented, not how much background work we did. She added that I seemed nervous and less engaging than my group members. I said that wasn't fair because I put in all the effort and got the worst grade. She told me she graded fairly based on the criteria and that I shouldn't be upset just because I didn't like the outcome. Her tone was getting sharp, like I was bothering her. I said I wasn't being unreasonable and was just pointing out that if the grade was supposed to reflect our work, then it should reflect who did the work. She said she'd made her decision and that the conversation was over. I left feeling angry and helpless. Later that day, Karen cornered me in the hallway. She said she'd heard I complained to the teacher about the grades. I confirmed that I had because it wasn't fair. She told me I was being way too much about this and should have just asked nicely instead of accusing the teacher of grading wrong. I said I did ask nicely and that I wasn't wrong because she'd barely done anything. She insisted she'd contributed and said just because I decided to do everything myself didn't mean I got to be mad at the rest of them. She walked away before I could respond. That night, my parents got an email from the teacher. She told them I had been rude and disrespectful in class. She said I was acting entitled and couldn't accept criticism. My parents sat me down and asked what happened. I explained everything. My mom was furious, but not at me. She said so I'd done all the work and got the lowest grade, and now the teacher was calling me entitled. My dad agreed and said the whole thing was completely backward. They scheduled a meeting with the teacher and the principal. At the meeting, my parents brought printed copies of all my research notes, the original script I'd written with timestamps, and the edit history of the slideshow showing I'd created every single slide. The principal looked through everything while the teacher sat there with her arms crossed. The principal said that based on the evidence, it seemed clear that I'd contributed significantly more than my grade reflected. The teacher insisted she'd graded based on presentation skills, and that was what the rubric stated. My mom pointed out that the rubric also stated that research, content creation, and teamwork were factors, and that the teacher couldn't ignore those completely. The principal made the teacher reevaluate our grades. I got bumped up to a 10. The guy stayed at a 9, which was fair since he'd actually helped a little. Karen got dropped to a 6. When the new grades were announced, Karen tried to argue, but the teacher just said grades were based on actual contribution and effort. Funny how that standard suddenly mattered when it wasn't about me anymore. Karen stopped talking to me after that. I didn't care. My wife and I had been planning a nice dinner that evening, and we'd been looking forward to it all week since we rarely got the chance to relax together anymore. She worked nights at the hospital, and my schedule at the warehouse was all over the place, so these quiet evenings meant everything to us. The store was packed, people were everywhere, pushing carts and blocking aisles. I managed to grab one of the last good ribeyes from the meat section and tossed it in my cart along with everything else we needed. The price tag said $22.99, which was steep, but we were treating ourselves. My wife had wandered off to grab some vegetables while I headed toward the checkout. When I felt someone's hand reach into my cart, I looked up and saw this woman pulling out our steak. She was already moving it toward her own cart like it was the most natural thing in the world. I told her to excuse me, but that steak was mine. She didn't even look at me. She said she saw it first. I explained that no, she didn't because I had picked it up from the meat section and put it in my cart. She told me she needed it more than I did. I wasn't trying to start anything. I just reached over and gently took the steak back from her hand. She stepped closer, her voice getting louder. She asked me how I dared to grab something from her. I reminded her that it was in my cart, and she took it from my cart. She told me she had guests coming over that night, and this was important. I said so did we, and that's why I already got this one. My wife appeared at the end of the aisle carrying a bag of potatoes. She could tell something was off just by looking at my face. She started walking over. The woman told me I was being incredibly rude right now, and to just let her have it. I told her there were more steaks in the meat section, and she should go get one of those. She insisted they were all terrible quality and this was the only good one. That wasn't even true. I'd seen at least 3 other nice cuts when I was over there, but she wasn't interested in logic. She reached for the steak again, and I moved the cart slightly to keep it away from her. When she completely lost it, she said, "Fine, if I was gonna be like that." She lunged forward, and before I could react, her finger jabbed straight into my left eye. The pain was instant and blinding. I stumbled backward, my hand flying up to cover my face. Everything went blurry and tears started streaming down my cheek. I could barely see anything. I heard my wife's voice cut through the chaos. She asked what the hell the woman just did. The woman started to say that I wouldn't give her what she needed and that I had grabbed her first. She didn't get to finish that sentence. My wife's fist connected with the side of her face with a solid crack that echoed through the aisle. The woman dropped like a stone. 1 second she was standing there making excuses. The next she was flat on the floor, completely unconscious. Several people around us gasped. Someone screamed. My wife was standing over her, shaking out her hand. She said nobody touches her husband. I was still trying to blink away the tears and pain. My eye felt like it was on fire. Someone called out that they were dialing 911. Within seconds, store employees rushed over. One of them started asking what happened while another checked on the woman, still lying motionless on the floor. A third employee brought over the first aid kit and asked if I needed anything for my eye. I told them I couldn't see properly and everything was blurry. The paramedics arrived first. They immediately went to work on the unconscious woman, checking her vitals and trying to wake her up. One of the EMTs came over to me and examined my eye with a small flashlight. He said it looked like there might be some corneal damage, but I'd need to see a specialist to be sure. He asked if I wanted to go to the hospital right now. I told him I'd wait to see what the police said first. The police showed up shortly after. 2 officers separated us and started taking statements. My wife explained exactly what happened. She told them the woman had poked me in the eye and she reacted to protect me. I told them my side through the throbbing pain. I explained how the woman had tried to steal a steak from my cart, and when I took it back, she assaulted me. Other shoppers who'd witnessed everything backed up our story. One older man said he'd been watching the whole thing unfold from 2 aisles over. A younger woman said she saw the whole assault happen and was ready to testify if needed. The officers asked to see the security footage. The store manager took them to the back office while we waited. My wife stayed close to me, her arm around my shoulders. She kept apologizing for hitting the woman, but I told her not to. That lady had assaulted me first. When the cops came back, their expressions had changed. They'd seen everything on camera. The woman reaching into my cart, me taking the steak back, her jabbing me in the eye. My wife's defensive response. One officer said they were placing her under arrest once she woke up. The other officer asked if we wanted to press charges. We both said yes immediately. The woman finally came to when the paramedics were loading her onto a stretcher. She started screaming about being attacked and demanding we be arrested. She said my wife had assaulted her without provocation. The officers told her that she was the one going to jail. They explained that the security footage showed everything. She tried to argue that I had stolen her steak first. One officer told her the footage clearly showed me selecting the steak from the meat section and placing it in my cart. She said she just wanted a steak. One officer told her she assaulted someone over a piece of meat and was looking at battery charges. The other officer asked if she understood the severity of what she'd done. She went quiet after that. They took her away in the ambulance with a police escort. The store manager apologized profusely and gave us our groceries for free, including another steak to replace the one that had gotten knocked to the floor during the chaos. He also gave us a gift card worth $50 for our trouble. We went home and I put ice on my eye while my wife called to make an appointment with an ophthalmologist. She managed to get me in the next morning at 9:30 a.m. The steak sat in the fridge. Neither of us felt much like cooking anymore. We ended up ordering pizza instead. The next morning, the eye doctor confirmed what the EMT had suspected. I had a scratched cornea. He prescribed some antibiotic drops and told me it would heal in about a week. The bill came to $320, even with insurance. 3 weeks later, we got a court date. The woman pleaded guilty to avoid trial. The prosecutor told us she had a history of similar incidents at other stores. This wasn't her first time losing it over something trivial. She got 6 months probation, 100 hours of community service, anger management classes, and had to pay my medical bills. The judge also ordered her to pay an additional $500 in restitution for pain and suffering. The judge made it very clear that her behavior was unacceptable. He told her that assaulting someone over a steak was beyond ridiculous. My eye healed up fine eventually. No permanent damage, thank God. The ophthalmologist cleared me at my follow-up appointment 2 weeks later. My wife never apologized for that right hook. She said she'd do it again in a heartbeat if anyone ever hurt me like that. I'd been supporting 5 executives for about 18 months when everything started falling apart. The workload wasn't the problem at first. It was intense, but I could handle it. What made everything impossible was working alongside someone who refused to pull her weight while the rest of us drowned. My desk was constantly buried under files, reports needing formatting, travel arrangements that had to be perfect, and presentations due yesterday. Meanwhile, across the office, my co-worker sat scrolling through her phone most days. She supported 3 executives. 3, I had 5. The math alone should have meant more balance, but it never worked out that way. Our departments operated differently. Mine was non-stop chaos. Meetings, deadlines, client presentations, contract reviews. Something was always on fire. Her department moved in waves. Busy one week, dead quiet the next. That week, I knew they were in a quiet phase. I'd seen her executives leaving early, chatting by the coffee machine, taking long lunches. Nobody was drowning over there. That's why I thought asking for help would actually work this time. The quarterly reports were due Friday. 5 separate reports, each requiring different formatting, different data sets, different presentation styles. I had 3 days to finish them all while also handling my regular daily tasks. It was physically impossible. I walked over to her desk in the morning and asked if she was swamped with work. She barely looked up from her screen. I explained I was completely overwhelmed with these quarterly reports and asked if there was any chance she could take 2 of them. Just the formatting and final checks. I had all the data ready. She said sure, yeah, she could do that. I should have known then. I handed over the 2 thickest files, the ones I knew would take the longest. Relief washed over me. With those off my plate, I could actually make the deadline. I worked late Tuesday and Wednesday, powering through the other 3 reports, plus everything else that kept piling up. Thursday afternoon, she appeared at my desk. She dropped both files down with a heavy thud. She told me she couldn't do these because she'd been too busy to get around to it. I asked what she meant since the deadline was tomorrow. She said sorry, she had a lot going on. She walked away before I could respond. I sat there staring at those files, my stomach dropping. Too busy, she'd been too busy. I'd watched her leave at exactly 5 o'clock both days. I'd seen her taking personal calls at her desk, online shopping, chatting with people in the hallway. Too busy. This wasn't the first time. She'd pulled similar things before, always with excuses, always dumping work back at the last possible second. But this was the deadline. There was no buffer, no safety net. I stayed until midnight Thursday. Came in at 6 Friday morning. My eyes burned, my back ached. I got everything done, but barely. Monday morning, I'd had enough. Before our weekly staff meeting, I made the rounds. I stopped by each of her 3 executives' offices, clipboard in hand, professional smile on. I explained I was doing a review of admin workflow and task distribution. I asked them to tell me what administrative assignments they currently had outstanding. The first executive said nothing right now actually, pretty quiet this week. The second executive said same here, they were between projects. The third executive said nope, all caught up, should pick up again next week though. Perfect. Exactly what I'd suspected. I'd already talked with our manager weeks ago about being overloaded. She knew I was struggling. She told me to document everything and that we'd revisit workload distribution. Well, here was my documentation. I knocked on her office door before the staff meeting and asked if she had a quick second. I wanted to follow up on that workload conversation we had. She told me to come in. I explained I did an informal workflow review this morning. All 3 executives in the other department confirmed they have 0 outstanding assignments right now. Meanwhile, I had to work overtime just to meet Friday's deadline. She asked how much overtime. I said 6 hours Thursday night, 3 hours Friday morning. She frowned, making notes, then said we'd discuss this in the staff meeting. The meeting started normally. The status updates, upcoming projects, the usual. Then our manager looked directly at me. She said she noticed I logged significant overtime last week and asked me to explain why that was necessary. I said the quarterly reports took longer than expected. She asked if those weren't distributed between me and my colleague. This was it. I said she'd have to ask her about that, but I did distribute 2 of the 5 reports. Then she returned them to my desk Thursday afternoon, 2 days after I'd given them to her, saying she couldn't complete them. The room went silent. Everyone's attention shifted. Our manager turned slowly toward my coworker and asked if that was accurate. My coworker said, "Well, yes, but she'd been too busy to get to them. She had other priorities." Her voice was defensive, irritated even. She thought she had a valid excuse. Our manager asked too busy doing what, specifically. My coworker said just work, admin tasks. Our manager asked for which executives. The 3 executives she supported suddenly looked very interested in this conversation. Our manager's expression hardened. She said, "Let me ask directly. Did any of you assign administrative tasks to her last week?" The first executive said no, he didn't. The second executive said not from him. The third executive said nothing from his end either. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. All 3 of them looked at each other, realization dawning. None of them had known the others also hadn't given her any work. They'd each assumed she was busy helping someone else. She turned bright red. The color spread from her neck up to her hairline. She stared hard at her notepad, pen frozen in her hand. Our manager asked, "So you returned urgent work to your colleague who was already managing 5 executives to your 3, saying you were too busy when you actually had 0 assignments from any of your supported staff." Silence. Heavy silence. My coworker stammered that there were other things. Our manager said we'll discuss this privately after the meeting. Nobody made eye contact with her for the rest of the meeting. People shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. The tension was suffocating. The meeting ended. Everyone scattered quickly. Our manager's door stayed closed for over an hour. The next week I noticed our manager conducting interviews. People I didn't recognize coming and going from her office. HR was involved. By the end of the month, she was gone. Her desk cleared out, her nameplate removed, her 3 executives suddenly reporting through a different administrative channel until her replacement started. The new person was efficient, helpful, and actually did the work when asked. The workload got redistributed more fairly. I stopped working late constantly. The whole office felt lighter somehow. I've been at the company for about 8 months when this happened. My desk was right next to hers, and we'd worked together on a handful of projects before without any real issues. She seemed friendly enough, always chatting about her weekend plans or complaining about traffic. Last Monday, she leaned over the divider between our desks and asked if I could help her with a presentation. She had to get it done by Friday for our team meeting, and she was struggling with a few slides. I figured it wouldn't take long, so I said sure. She sent me 3 slides that needed some charts and formatting. I finished them by the afternoon and sent them back to her. She thanked me and said they looked great. Wednesday morning I got a message from her around 10. She told me she knew I'd already helped her, but she wanted me to look at one more section because she was still stuck on the data analysis part. I was in the middle of my own work, but I took a break and reviewed what she sent. The section needed a lot of cleanup, so I spent an hour reorganizing the information and fixing the graphs. I sent it back to her with some notes on what I changed. She replied with a quick thanks and a smiley face. I noticed she didn't mention anything about finishing the rest herself. Thursday afternoon, right before lunch, another message popped up on my screen. She said she had a date that night after work and was running behind on the presentation. She asked me to just finish the rest for her since I was already in the flow with it anyway. I stared at the message for a second, not sure I'd read it correctly. She was asking me to finish her entire presentation because she had a date. There were still at least 4 or 5 slides left that she hadn't even started. I told her I couldn't finish the whole thing for her because I had my own deadlines to meet. She pushed back and said it wouldn't take me that long since I already knew the project. I explained that I'd helped her with a few slides, but this was her presentation and she needed to finish it herself. She said she thought I was a team player, but apparently not. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to argue with her over a message, and I had my own work to focus on. I put my phone away and tried to get back to what I was doing, but the whole exchange left a bad taste in my mouth. Around 6 that evening, I was packing up to leave when my phone buzzed with a notification from our team group chat. She'd sent a message to everyone, including our manager. She wrote that she wanted to say how disappointing it was when people didn't care about the team. She said some of us were trying to deliver quality work, but others just couldn't be bothered to help out when it mattered. I felt my face get hot. She was clearly talking about me, and she'd put it out there for the whole team to see. A few people reacted with confused emojis, and someone asked what happened. She didn't respond to that. One of my teammates sent me a private message asking if everything was okay. I told them I'd explain later. Our manager replied within minutes and told her that if she had a personal issue with a coworker, she needed to handle it privately. He said the group chat was for work updates only, and she shouldn't involve the entire team in her personal conflicts. The chat went silent after that. I left the office and spent the whole drive home replaying the situation in my head. I'd helped her twice already, and she had the nerve to call me out publicly because I wouldn't do her entire project for her. When I got home, I checked the group chat again to see if anyone else had said anything. No one had. The message just sat there like a stain. The next morning, she stopped by my desk before anyone else arrived. She said she was sorry about the message last night and that she was just stressed and didn't mean to drag everyone into it. I told her she put me on blast in front of the whole team because I wouldn't finish her work for her. She said she knew and that she was just frustrated and shouldn't have done that. I pointed out that she'd asked me to finish her presentation so she could go on a date, and that wasn't a team project issue but her trying to push her responsibilities onto someone else. She asked what else I wanted her to say. I told her I wanted her to actually mean it instead of acting like this was just some small mistake. She gave me a tight smile and walked back to her desk. The rest of the day was awkward. She didn't talk to me unless it was absolutely necessary, and even then her tone was clipped. I could feel her looking at me a few times, but every time I looked over, she was staring at her screen. By lunchtime, a couple of people on the team had started whispering near the break room. I overheard one of them mention the group chat, and they went quiet when I walked in. Friday came and she gave her presentation during the team meeting. As it was obvious she'd rushed through the last sections. The slides I'd helped her with looked polished, but the rest were messy and hard to follow. Some of the data didn't even match the charts she'd included. Our manager asked her a few questions about the data, and she stumbled through the answers. She kept saying she'd have to double-check and get back to him. He didn't look impressed. After the meeting, our manager pulled her aside for a private conversation. I didn't hear what was said, but she came back to her desk looking annoyed. She grabbed her bag and left early without saying anything to anyone. The following Monday, our manager sent out an email about project ownership and accountability. It didn't name anyone specifically, but the timing made it pretty clear what had prompted it. The email emphasized that everyone was responsible for their own deliverables and that asking for help was fine, but expecting others to take over your work was not acceptable. He also reminded everyone that professional conduct extended to all team communications, including group chats. She read the email at her desk and didn't say a word. Her face went a little red, but she kept her eyes on her screen. From that point on, she kept her distance. No more casual chats. No more asking for favors. She did her work, I did mine, and we barely interacted unless we had to. A few of my other co-workers mentioned they'd noticed the tension, but no one brought up the group chat incident directly. One of them told me privately that they thought what she did was out of line. I appreciated that, but I didn't feel the need to explain myself to everyone. A couple of weeks later, I overheard her complaining to another co-worker about how she felt like people were treating her differently. She didn't mention me by name, but it was obvious she was talking about the whole situation. The other co-worker just nodded and didn't really engage. She never apologized in a way that felt genuine, and her attitude after the fact made it clear she thought I was the problem, not her. But I wasn't about to let someone walk all over me just to keep the peace. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.